Hello, everybody, and welcome to this lecture in which I talk a little bit about professional practice. This video is pretty much geared towards students who are graduating and soon asking the question, do you want to work for somebody? Would you like to do freelance work? Would you like to do actually your own studio and be self-employed? And this video is also really good for sophomore students as well as junior students, because sooner or later, this is a question you have to ask yourself. The first step that is very important to come across professional once you graduate and you're looking for jobs, want to apply for a job, or would like to do your own contract work is you need to get your own new identity. So that means basically a new email, new website. You can connect this obviously to your existing professional LinkedIn profile, but you want to disconnect everything what you do professionally from your private online presence. It's like there are two people of you, the private person and the professional person. Also something to consider, and this is not very complicated or expensive, particularly for those who would like to do contract work or do your own commercial work as a studio or a creative entity, you want to create an LLC, a limited liability company. And that basically has two advantages. First, and that's the main advantage, it protects your private assets. And the fees for it is not really that much, kind of like starting at, they say here right now, $80 plus filing fees. It's not really much. The nice thing with that is you also have all the advantages of running your own business. You get a tax ID, you can get discounts at companies because you have a company. Also for banks, you can get a company bank account or checking account or credit card. So it really has a lot of benefits and it's not really that expensive. And the second nice advantage or bonus is, well, you just look more professional because you have your own LLC. You took this extra step of setting this up. You also want to think about your website presence. And I broke this down into two options, company or freelance. But ideally, I'm going to make the case that whatever you choose, you want to have also at least your own domain. The email address, there we can be a little bit more flexible. The industry today is also more accommodating compared to 20 years ago. But having your own website domain, that's actually not too bad and pretty easy. So shall you go with a company? I would go then with a professional hoster, for example, like GoDaddy. That gives you the advantage that you can create your own unique domain, for example, amazingdesign.com. And you also get your unique email address, info@amazingdesign.com. And then this email you can access via any standard email program on Windows, Mac, Android, or iOS. Here in GoDaddy, let's type in Amazing Design and let's see what we get. Oh, $19,000. That's actually not too bad. So what's going on here? Somebody assumed at one point in human existence with the internet, somebody wants to have the domain amazingdesign.com and they parked it. Parking means they bought it, reserved it, and now they're just waiting for somebody who's coming on their knees and is begging to please sell that domain. Well, obviously, we're not going to do this. And we have other options. For example, amazingdesign.co for a meager $9 at the beginning and then $40 for the following years. Or Amazing Design Company as a suggestion, for example, $20. Two takeaways from this. First, you see the per year cost of a domain is actually not that much, including web hosting. Everything is in there. So it's like $20 to $40 per year. That's really kind of like peanuts. And this is an expense you can also use as an expense to lower your taxes. Because every type of work you do, now you have to pay taxes for it. And secondly, we can and you also have to be creative with the domain. Obviously, all the generic common names are used. and you don't want to use domains which are too close for very well famous companies, so they come after you because you're close to their fruit company logo. And you, for your studio or for your design, you also want to have a domain that's easy to memorize. It can be your name, it can be something interesting. It doesn't matter really what it is, but think about how easy it is for people to memorize it too. Yeah, and that's basically really all that's behind GoDaddy. Then you can create this domain and also the web hosting there. Shall you then, however, only want to go with a Google domain, which is pretty cheap? Now, if we go to Google domain, for example, let's go to here, and then we type in amazing design. So there we can see it's like $12 per year. So a little bit less. It's not too much. It's actually not that super cheap. It's like 50% cheaper to 3 times cheaper than, for example, GoDaddy. But this is just only the domain. If you don't need all that other stuff, now you can save a few dollars per year. You can then get your unique domain, but then not email. But with email, honestly, we can use, for example, Gmail or the Google email address. I'm personally biased against Hotmail or Yahoo. That seems a little bit kind of like unprofessional. The main reason why I give Google a little bit of a bonus here is also with Google comes all the Google apps which you can use. So it's kind of like a crux. So I know I'm kind of like breaking a little bit my get a unique email, but then say, hey, if you have a domain, at least with the email, then we can go with the Gmail stuff. More about this actually later in this lecture. And then when you have your domains, also, how do we do the website design? GoDaddy has its own website designer built in too. And in my other lecture, I talked about the website design. Now, the two services I highly can suggest is Google Site because it's so easy to learn. It's kind of simplistic, but still pretty effective, easy to maintain. And the Wix Editor X is really fantastic, just takes a lot more time to learn and is very powerful for those who just want to spend more time tinkering on the website. But honestly, if you can, your website is not going to be that super important. The work you show is much more important, which is again why I feel maybe something like Google Sites can just be enough, at least for the start. And yeah, so basically then this way you can go with GoDaddy, full-fledged domain in email. If you want to be a company, you can go with Google domain and Gmail. If you want to be a freelancer and then our online website presence, then we can do via Google Sites or Wix. Besides a website and email address, you also want to be able to be reached via phone. So for communication, you can buy yourself another kind of like company phone and phone line and data plan, which is really quite expensive in my opinion. Or what you can do is you use Google Voice. Google Voice is kind of like an online phone number. People can call, they can text, they can reach you via it. You can also call through Google Voice too, from your Mac, from your PC, from your Android, from your iPad, from your tablet. So it's really perfect. It's a fantastic service to use. So let me show you how this actually works. It's also pretty easy. I'm switching here in Chrome to my secondary profile. Again, this is kind of like what I'm talking about, having your own like private profile and then kind of like your commercial profile. This is my demo profile for this lecture. So I type in Google Voice. To my understanding, so far it's still cheap, or actually free, I meant to say. And it's pretty bare bone too. So here is call, messages, and voicemail. my numpad, I can type in a number and then call it. And you can also set up kind of like a greeting box, call forwarding. So in case somebody calls you on your Google Voice number, which let's see here, get a number in, let's say Flint. So then here, one of these numbers I could pick and then actually reserve for myself. And when they call this, now your computer could ring in a browser, or for example, you could forward it to then your private phone. And you can even set this up that you're only reachable during a certain amount of business hours. So this is actually a really, really fantastic tool to have. When it comes to meeting, today we also have two very nice, cost-effective, basically free options. On the Apple side, we can use Apple Calendar to create and invite people to meetings, events. And then Apple also now allows you to create a URL, like an invite for FaceTime meetings, which pretty much works like Zoom. And the nice thing is, this is also possible for people who do not have an Apple device. So you can share this link with somebody on Windows, and then in a browser, they join actually that meeting. On the Google side, well, we can use Google Meet and Google Calendar. That's all built in. And again, this is just two very powerful tools so you can organize and meet with your clients, particularly in today's time, if you work with clients who are not necessarily local in a different state or even abroad. And here, if I go to my test account, now here we have the chat spaces, here's the meet one, and then we also could go to the calendar. So this is all built in right into Gmail, which is actually why I mentioned for freelance work, if you want, you can really just have a professional domain. And then for emailing, calendar, and all that stuff, you just then use your Gmail account, which is really good. There is, by the way, if you look into Google Workspaces, since I mentioned this, there is an option to also, it's a fee of $6, I think, per month for the beginning. Yeah, 6 months for business starters. Then you can actually connect your professional domain and your professional email, and then use all the Google services for that, if you want just to do the $6 per month. And then when it comes to sharing data, we also there have two very good options. You can work with Google Drive or you can work with Apple iCloud. Both services are free with a certain amount of online storage, and they allow you to have kind of like you can make a folder, invite clients, and then they can upload files. You can upload files, you can download files, they can download files. It's actually really great. I primarily work with Google Drive. The main reason because it also has versioning built in. So if I modified a file and then I saved it and weeks later I need to go back to a previous version, I can roll back that, to that previous version, which is actually really good. And this really streamlines data collaboration with your client as well, actually, as I should put this here below. Data backup. Nothing is more frustrating than your computer crashing and you lost all your work. So definitely something you want to do. Maybe this is actually even more important. So do not underestimate actually the need for this. One of the most annoying parts of freelance work or doing your own design studio is time tracking. So how much time do you work for a client on a project? There are various options. Now you can use pen and paper, you can use an Excel sheet, take notes. I since years work with Toggle. I find this application just fantastic. It is really good. I personally cannot live without it. And the nice thing is, for the basic version, it's even free. So here, let me quickly log in. I go to the timer. The interface is actually very simplistic. So here we can see some of my entries I left in to be visible, kind of like I wrote what I did, what project, what client for, when did I do this. And then later we can create reports, for example, for a particular project. So how much did I work on this project? Show me this week. Not really anything. What about last year? Oh, last year I worked 6 hours on this project. Okay, very good. Well, I'm curious, how much did I actually work the last, let's say, the last 12 months? There it tells you all the hours basically and then blocks it out. This then is something you can also export as, for example, a PDF or something. They also have the ability to create teams and clients. You can also do even invoices and billing. You also have a mobile app, a desktop app. So it's actually really great. You can make it run on your iPhone or so. So the moment I start working, I specify what client project I'm working on. And then when I'm done, I hit stop. Or when I do a pause, let's say you do make a lunch break, you can pause it. And then later you restart. I cannot stress the same way like having a backup of your files via Google Drive or so, how important this is. Nothing again is more frustrating when you just work and you got sidetracked and then you don't know. Did I spend 1 hour? Did I spend 4 hours? Because you do not want to overbill your client. You also do not want not to charge enough. And the nice thing about this tracking is then also you can really get a good estimate. How fast do you work? I, for example, quite often simply underestimate how long something takes. And this really helps me or helped me to get really a good picture about how long realistically I still going to work on something. And then there is bookkeeping. Oh, so annoying this task. But you can make your life yourself very complicated or try to streamline the way how you do it. I basically with Toggle track my time and then I write my invoices and then I have a spreadsheet that states I sent an invoice out and then once I get paid, I have then a spreadsheet where I also mark paid. You can do this in the Google apps or in the Apple apps. Again, the nice thing is these applications are free to use. If you're on a Mac, it's free. Actually, on the PC, you can make a free iCloud account and then use the Apple apps online too. I personally, because I'm so invested also with Gmail and everything, I do the majority of the stuff actually in Google Apps. And it's really great to also track your expenses. Again, if you are a freelancer, you have your own LLC, for example, etc., or your studio, you buy paper. That's an expense. You buy markers. That's an expense. You buy software, computer. You have to pay for internet. This is all an expense you can track. And then when you do your taxes, you have basically an overview of this is how much I have expenses, and that can then lower your deductible. And here you see an invoice which I created in Pages, so which is part of the Apple programs. Now you have your logo, what the invoice is, who is it for, client, invoice number, very important, the date, and the task you do. Now with the description, what did you do, quantity, rate, and so forth. Then you can also add your payment options, etc. The main reason why I really like doing this in Pages is for the simple reason, because in Pages, which is kind of like a word editor, you can also add a spreadsheet and then have functions in it. So for example, if you have multiple let's say here we put in 3 times now. So this is the rate 100, total is then this multiplied by this, and then the total is the sum of all this. Now you see it does actually prevent you from having to crunch and do the math by yourself. You can set up a business calculation. So it accumulates everything directly for you. It's actually really nice. It's a good relief. Also, this way you know the numbers you punch in and the total you get is really accurate. There are no mistakes, because nothing is more irritating if you actually then write invoices and then there are incorrect numbers. Clients check this now when they have to pay for it. So you don't want to embarrass yourself by showing that you didn't master basic math. Now, the same thing we can also recreate, for example, in Google Docs. So here in my test account, I go to Google Docs, make a new document. I will copy this image. Here's my header there, this header. This logo I will center. Very good. And then here, for example, I select all this, copy and paste this in. There we are. And now I would need to, for example, set everything up. I need some tabs there. Add the left tab. You see how this all moved over. Maybe one tab here. I need a second tab there. Bring this over. So now you see, now when I write something here, or tab, write something there, tab there, it just jumps into it. So it's more like a Word document. And that's the same way also how I have everything set up in Pages. And then you can also insert a table here. And then there you basically do exactly the same. I don't think this is just the part that I don't think that actually works, to have a function inside there. We have drawing tools. Yeah, I don't think so actually that works in Google Docs. Probably via some of the add-ons it can work. Honestly, I didn't really look into it that much because I have the system set up really well in Pages. Now, going back to here, just so you see, let's go to their Excel version. And again, the same you can also do with numbers, for example, on a Mac. But besides the invoices, now you want to keep track of them and if they're paid or not, but also maybe how many invoices you sent out per year, how much did you make, and then also your expenses. So for example, here, this one I can call Bookkeeping 2022, let's say. And now it's up to you to decide what this is. So maybe we call this client. Or actually, hold on, we call this invoice number. And then client and project amount. Actually, yeah. And then is it paid? No? So then here, maybe this is 001. Then whoever we worked for, amazing design, we worked for $100 and it is paid, yes. And then there's invoice 2. And actually you want to number those kind of like logically this way. The numbers are formatted right now so that it's going down to just 1. And let's say here $20, and then later here double click in, equal sum, and click and drag. Oh, sum there. Thank you. And bracket there, 120. Yeah, so this way then you can really see over a year, for example, what you did. Now on this sheet, a little tip, I simply call invoices. And then plus. And then this sheet I will call expenses. And I could say internet, Comcast, maybe how much? Now, if every month you pay exactly the same, you could say $90, 12 times, and that then is equal. Yep, that is actually correct. Jeez. And then maybe, let's say, paper. I bought this maybe at Staples. If I just want to know, let's say I paid 100, and then here could say, now if I like say equal this there, and at the end here again, equal sum bracket and zip all you together. So now I know over this year I paid $1,180 in expenses. Again, this is just really very easy and bare bone. You can buy expensive programs for this stuff, but honestly, I find you need to track your time, you need to track your invoices, you need to track your expenses, write this down in Excel or kind of like something like Pages or Google Docs. And that's honestly it. It works really well. And you don't really pay anything for these services. You hear me talking a lot about free services or very cost-effective solutions. The main reason for that is no matter if you want to be a freelance designer or start your own studio, besides being a good creative person, you also have to be a very good and frugal business person. You can't separate these two. I, for example, I teach primarily. That gives me access to a lot of education software, which, however, I cannot use for my commercial work. And I don't necessarily want to just, for the projects I do, have to pay a lot for the software. Obviously, I try to get it as cheap as possible to be more competitive. And in my experience, it turned out that as long as it's not really a must-have for a particular program to work with, as long as another software can get the job done, I never got into any problem. So now if you have to do a rendering, if your client just wants a rendering, they don't care about what software you use. The image just has to be good. If your client wants to have something 3D printed, they don't care what program you use to create that geometry. If you have to deliver something in Illustrator or Photoshop or later in AutoCAD, also there, it doesn't really matter really what program you use as long as you can save in these formats. And I even had cases where they needed me to use a particular software I didn't have. Then this is now the great time actually of subscription. They paid actually for that month of the subscription, or I bought it and I expensed them for it. So I think this is really another very strong and important point. And this is also one of the core elements of my teaching and why I don't really care that much about it has to be Adobe or so, because I think this is just gibberish, if I'm really quite honest. These programs all do more or less really the same. And the only thing that's really important is if you work as a freelance designer and you have a delivery, can you meet that delivery? If you work in a team and you share the file, basically they're the same too. And in my case, I never had any time that problem. So, and for you, this can then really lower actually your expenses. Now, for example, as a professional, the Adobe stuff is going to probably cost you $40 or so per month. Well, for $45, I bought this program. For $45, I bought this, and for $45, I bought this. So $150 one-time investment, and that's now 3 years ago. Now you can compare that $150 versus around, let's say we go every month, so $500 renting the software package. Not trying to make a case against Adobe, but I'm just simply talking about what's cost effective. Don't buy into it has to be the software. Programs always really do the same. And this is pretty much everything what I wanted to talk about as part of this professional practice, tips and tricks or everybody who is graduating and soon would like to work as a freelance designer, or even start your own design studio.